Thank you, Kathy. It's my pleasure today to welcome back Dr. Joe Schaffer to interview this year's Circle of Champions honoree. Dr. Schaffer, we're thrilled to have you back, and we appreciate your strong leadership at LCCC. This year's Circle of Champions inductee is an example of positivity and servant leadership that we can all aspire to. He has spent a career running a successful business, but more importantly, mentoring other business folks and supporting our community. In recent months, as the COVID-19 virus presented challenges that hit many of our businesses quite hard, this year's honoree stepped up to help those in need. He has been a critical part of the efforts to rescue Cheyenne businesses through mentoring, strategic planning, and reopening tactics. Also advocating for businesses that have been impacted the most during this time. It is my honor to welcome Tim Joannides as this year's Circle of Champions recipient.
Can you hear me? You hear me?
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many faces. I apologize for those of you who are behind the podium, but hopefully you can see our smiling faces up on the screen. An honor to be back and be part of this very important event of the Chamber of Commerce, the Circle of Champions. And Tim, let me be one of the first to congratulate you for joining this prestigious group and this wonderful honor.
Thank you, Joe. It's an honor to be here. I'm very humbled. When I looked at the list of people that have received this honor in the past, I'm not sure I believe I should be in the company of those folks, but thank you.
As I've shared before, it's comments like that that make me feel even more assured that you are exactly the type of person that should be joining the Circle of Champions. So, folks, we've got a wonderful story to tell and a really a unique opportunity here and a lot to cover. So we're going to jump right in. Tim, if you're ready.
How are we going to cover 50 years in 45 minutes? That's what I want to know.
You've been practicing your auctioneering skills, correct?
Not really, but we'll give it our best shot.
We're going to do our best. So I know we're here to celebrate your legacy today, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't start first with your father's. He has an impressive story to tell as well, and I know he had a significant influence on the man you are today. Tell us about him and how you started working together.
Well, my father immigrated here in 1930 from the island of Cyprus. He was a Cypriot. He's born and raised in the island of Cyprus, was very well educated, went to 3 different finishing schools, and he had a dream. He wanted to get out of that country. There was a lot of turmoil going on in those days. It was just a really bad situation. And he talked his parents into allowing him to board a ship and come to the United States. That was his dream. My grandmother sewed a $5 gold piece in his pocket. That's what he had. That's what he landed in New York with. He befriended some folks from the Quad Cities, Rock Island, Illinois, that were on their honeymoon, and they were returning from Greece on their honeymoon, and he befriended them, and they actually offered him a job washing dishes at the Toasty Cafe, the Toasty Shop, they called it, downtown Rock Island. So that's how he made it to this country. And he lived at the YMCA. I think it was 75 cents a week is what he paid for a room. And I may be off a couple pennies there. But in any case, he immediately enrolled at Augustana College in Rock Island. And he wanted to further his education, even though he was very well educated. At that time, he spoke 6 different languages fluently. He was sitting in his room one night at the YMCA, and the knock on the door, and the young man, he opened the door, and there's a gentleman there and with New York Life Insurance Company, and he was wanting to sell my dad life insurance. And Dad invited him in and says, tell me more about this life insurance stuff. I want to hear more about what you're doing and how all this works. Well, to make a long story short, he ended up going to work for New York Life. And he was with him for like 35 or 36 years, and he was one of the top producers in the nation. So it's quite a story. They went from, and by the way, he met my mother in the Quad Cities in Rock Island. My mother's parents immigrated from Greece. and they grew up in the same village. They were married in a little village called Methoni, Greece. Stefan, I think, matter of fact, your grandmother was in the next village, Kalamata, over from Methoni. Beautiful village there. And they married over in Greece. They came over together, and they landed in Chicago. And then my grandfather was in the restaurant business, so he had an opportunity to go to the Quad Cities and run a restaurant there. So that's how they ended up in the Quad Cities. So Mom and Dad met there, and then I came along in 1947. It's quite a ride. Dad, by the way, decided in 1941, I believe it was, he decided to join the Naval Reserve. Now, he was so proud to be an American. And by the way, he came through Ellis Island, and he told me the stories on when he first saw the Statue of Liberty, how he cried, and he said, "This is democracy." And I always remember that. In any case, he was very proud of his new country, and he wanted to serve his country, and he joined the Naval Reserve, and he actually, and he walked away, took a leave of absence from his very lucrative life insurance business. He was the top agent in the Davenport, Iowa branch, one of the top agents in the Midwest at that time. But he knew he needed to serve his country, so he and my mother agreed, and he went to the reserve. And then they ended up transferred them to Hawaii. So they were in Hawaii on that fateful day, in December 7th, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. So Dad was a naval officer at that time because he was a lieutenant in communications because he could speak all these languages. So he and Mother were there when that happened, and they quickly put her on a ship, and she came back in the hull of a ship. She had a good story about that, and by the way, Mom gave speeches. Mother lived to be 100 years in about 6 months. She left us a couple of years ago. But up until her early 90s, she was giving speeches about being a wife, a surviving wife of a military person at Pearl Harbor. She gave her Pearl Harbor stories. I think a lot of you probably already had heard her speak. She went to a lot of the schools and different civic clubs and so forth. So that's a little bit about Mom and Dad. And of course, after the war, he came back to the Quad Cities and continued with his insurance business.
So Tim, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you started out working with your father a little bit in the insurance business.
Well, I was born in 47, and again in Moline, Rock Island area. I was born in Moline. We ended up moving to Rock Island when I was in grade school. And I got to be honest with you, I had a wonderful childhood. I've got a lot of great memories of growing up in the 50s and in the 60s, and we had a beautiful home there in Rock Island, and I spent a lot of time washing cars and mowing grass, and not just for our home, but our family and our neighbors, and I ride my bike across town. By the way, my first bicycle was a Corvette. Now, Billy, did you know Schwinn made a Corvette? It was a Schwinn Corvette. That was my first Corvette, by the way, of many to follow, but it was a Schwinn. My first car was a pedal car, one of those little pedal cars. So I started early. But Dad would, he worked a lot of hours. We had a lot of evening appointments, but he'd take me with him a lot. And I really enjoyed that. And we'd walk into people's homes. Of course, he always had an appointment. And he always, most of his clientele were professionals, doctors and dentists and attorneys and people with means. But in any case, not that he didn't talk to other folks. We had a lot of clients. But in any case, he had a great influence in my life. Our life was really focused on church and family. We spent a lot of time at church, spent a lot of time with our family, a lot of family events. Mom's family, a lot of family was in Chicago, so we'd spend a lot of time in the car, driving to Chicago. At that time, this is before the interstate, and I think it was Highway 6. I think it used to go to Chicago, and still there from the Quad Cities. And Dad would brag to all my uncles and how he was driving 90 and 95 miles an hour. That's where I got that from, by the way, Kathy. It's not my fault. and he always drove a new Oldsmobile, and then later on in '59, he decided he move up and he started driving Cadillacs. His first Cadillac was a '59. But I had an opportunity, I had two sisters, by the way, and one older, one younger, and I like to ride in the front seat because I like to call cars. They call it calling cars. I sit there and say, well, that's a Ford, that's a Chevy, that's a Plymouth, that's a DeSoto, it's a Lincoln, so forth. So Mom would hand me a notepad, and I'd start writing them down, how many Buicks I saw that day, or how many Pontiacs, and how many Fords. So I was a car caller, and I just loved to identify the cars. And I was seldom wrong about that. It was a passion.
That's great. So obviously you had a passion and interest in cars. How did you first start your career in the automobile industry?
Well, it's an interesting question. And by the way, I've had an opportunity to, because I'm now moving into my offices downtown out of the Halladay dealership, and that's another story for another time. It's taken me a little longer than I anticipated. I got 50 years worth of stuff I got to move. But in any case, I've had an opportunity to reflect. I'm going through all these old files and records and different things, and I've had a chance to reflect on my 50 years in the business. But it all started while I was working for my father out of college, and I worked in his insurance agency, and he also had an investment company. We owned a lot of different, he had a lot of rental homes, rental properties, and I helped manage that. And when I was in high school, I painted a lot of those buildings and did a lot of fixing up and so forth. And I got all that out of my system. That's why I don't paint anymore. But in any case, it was through Dad that he encouraged me to enter his business, and I really enjoyed it. And I got my license. I went to junior college. I did attend Bradley University for a couple of years out of high school, and married my high school sweetheart. And shortly thereafter, I went to work, and I was working 3 jobs at Bradley in Peoria, Illinois. And one of our employees, Bill Huff's daughter, now goes to Bradley, so it's a little deja vu. But I worked 3 jobs there in Peoria. One of them was I was a drummer, and I played in the nightclub. I played the nightclub scene when I was 19 years old. You could do that then. And I was driving I was working on a delivery truck for Bergner's department store, and I drove a courtesy van for the Holiday Inn. You didn't know about that, Jim, did you? Taking customers to the airport and all that kind of stuff. So I studied. After that, we decided to move back to the Quad Cities, went to work for Dad, and took the license. And at that time, I was working at International Harvester Farm Oil Works, and it was down near the river. And that's when I decided that I didn't want to do that kind of work the rest of my life. But it was a great experience, and everybody should try it. And I also had my first experience with unions, and I don't want to get into all that, but that was an interesting experience. But in any case, I learned. I knew that that's not something I wanted to do, and it encouraged me and motivated me to continue my education and get my insurance license. And I went to work with Dad. And we really had a great partnership. We did really well, and I sold lots of life insurance. But I came to realize it really wasn't my passion. And I still wanted to do something with cars. And my brother-in-law at that time, who's still a good friend, Mickey Steele, called me one day and says, Tim, he says, you got to come down here to Mill Chevrolet. I've been down here, and I knew he'd been working there for a few months, and he was making a lot of money selling cars. He says, I think I can get you on. So I went down and I applied for the job of the new car sales manager. And the guy says, I don't think you're the type of person that we'd be interested in hiring. Okay. So I said, well, I'm going to show him. So I went across the river and I went over to Davenport, Iowa, and I interviewed with the Lou Jack Schubrock. There was a really large Chevrolet dealership at that time down there. They didn't think I could cut it. So then I went to the Ford, no, it was another Chevrolet dealer in East Moline, Illinois. And once again, I was turned down. Well, Mickey was persistent, and he called me the next day, a couple of days later. He said, listen, he said, I got you on at the used car lot. Mills Chevrolet had a huge car lot, a nice corner lot up on the other side of town. He says, and Ralph said he'd give you a shot. I said, okay, great. So I went to work for Ralph at the used car lot at Mills Chevrolet, and the rest was history. I quickly learned how to sell cars, and I did very well at it. And I was their top salesperson for I don't know how long. So that would have been in June of '69. And the fall of 1970, for the you historians, was the first big strike that General Motors had against their, the union workers and so forth. The union struck against the plants. And our plants were actually down. The manufacturing plants were down for like 6 or 7 months. Can you imagine that? So at the end of the strike, we had 12 cars on the lot. So we learned, it was a great education. I learned how to sell cars without any inventory. Kind of like we're doing right now, Mr. Casey. And we were taking sold orders, and we were pre-selling cars before, and we had sheets and sheets of paper lined up on the showroom windows of cars that were all pre-sold, and we just pre-sold the cars. And of course, we got big time into the used car business. So I was quick. I closed the used car lot because he wanted to consolidate, and they moved me down to the new car showroom. New sales manager came in. He kind of took to me. His name was Kenny Matson, one of my mentors, and he kind of took me under his wing, and that's when I soon became a sales manager. And I really learned a lot from him. He was a great mentor. So that's how I got into the car business.
So Tim, selling cars, you certainly cut your teeth there, were successful, really represented your interest in your connection to customers, but ultimately you wanted to own a dealership. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so I worked for Mill Chevrolet for almost 10 years, which is unheard of back then and really kind of unheard of today. I mean, I was at the same dealership and had a great clientele, had a great following. I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I had this burning desire, yes, to have my own dealership. But my goal was to have it before I turned 30. So like 3 weeks, and I looked at a lot of different dealerships. I looked at Fords and Chrysler and Chevy, and at that time, a GM dealership or even a Ford dealership demanded a lot of blue sky, and I didn't have the wherewithal to do that. I didn't have the resources. So I ended up, and every Thursday I'd go out and I'd buy used cars. And I drove around the Quad City area, and I expanded my horizons into Iowa and other places like that. And I would call on these dealers, and they were a good source for used cars. And that's how I was also out kind of scouting for a dealership and got the word out. And lo and behold, there was a little Dodge dealership in Galesburg, Illinois. And Galesburg's kind of between the Quad Cities and Peoria. And got wind that the Dodge dealer was thinking about selling or getting out, so I called on him. And one thing led to another, and I ended up being able to negotiate a deal with him, and he was ready to exit, and I was able to put the deal together. And so I ended up becoming the Dodge dealer in Galesburg, Illinois. We named it Town and Country Dodge, your friend in the car business. You like that, Dusty? That was a good one. Yeah. We did good. We sold more cars in the first 6 months than the previous dealer did in 3 years. And I'm very proud of that. And, he had no inventory, and he was really winding it down. And we hit the ground running, and I was able to put together a great team. And by the way, this was in 1978. And, Dodge products weren't the best products in the world in 78 and 79, but they had great trucks and we had good vans. And I don't know if you remember the little surfer vans, those little short little conversion vans. Well, we were big into those. And I started ordering them by the truckload. And we found a little guy in town there that would convert them, and he put carpet in them, and he put the paneling in them, and we put a nice stereo in it, right? And then we put a little porthole window in the back, and we were selling them just crazy. Well, my competition wasn't real happy about that. And we had a very established Ford dealer. We had a very established Chevrolet dealer, been there a long time. Had a very established Cadillac Pontiac dealer, been there a long time. Long established Mercury Lincoln dealer. And they didn't really like my presence. I mean, I had billboards all over town. I had matchbooks. I've given Dusty some matchbooks. But every place you went, it was Town and Country Dodge. So I was kind of upsetting these guys a little bit because we were selling so many cars. Well, it turned out, little did I know at the time, but later on I found out, that the two of these dealers sat on the bank board that I was doing business with. Okay? So they were trying to figure out a way to get me out of town. Well, they didn't have to try too hard because in 1979, 1980, those were the Jimmy Carter years. I'm not talking politics, I'm just talking about facts. But as you recall, interest rates went to 22%. Unemployment in Galesburg went to over 20%. Think about that. And Chrysler was having its first near bankruptcy experience. That's when Iacocca came in to try to save the company. He actually did. So that was the circumstances, and that's the situation that I was working in. It was very difficult. It was very difficult. And of course, being a new dealership, you know, I was undercapitalized, right? Didn't have the wherewithal to withstand the downturn. New car sales dropped like a rock. And so I opened up a used car center, and that's where I recognized the value of having used cars to sell. And we did really well with the used cars. They kept us alive for a while, but it still wasn't enough to offset the losses of the 22% interest rates. Think about that. In any case, at the end of the day, in May of 81, I was forced to close the doors. So everything that I'd worked so hard for my whole life, my dreams, my goals, everything, I watched not go down the drain, but I had to walk away from it. It was very difficult. I'd also gone through a divorce that year, but I wasn't ready to give up. Giving up was not an option. I knew I had a family to support, an ex-wife. I had 3 beautiful children at that time to support, and I knew I needed to move forward. So I didn't let any grass grow under my feet, and I started looking around. Automotive news was the place to go to look for a job, and I scoured the Joannides every week and went through all that. And I was offered an interview by Holmes Tuttle Ford, Bobby, Ford, F-O-R-D. I didn't like selling Fords, by the way, Bobby. I got to tell you that, but I've told you that before. Bob's a dear friend. But in any case, they flew me down to Tucson, Arizona, and I interviewed for the job, and they wanted a general sales manager at the time, and I accepted the position. And I had 22 salespeople. It was a big dealership. We were one of the top 54 dealerships in the country at that time. Big store. In any case, Frank McClure was the general manager then, and he another one of the great mentors. I had the pleasure, and I was just so blessed to be able to work with him. And Stan Newton was their CFO at that time, and since that time, I know Randy, you've met Stan and Jim. Actually, he came up and worked with us when we were going through our big recession here 10 years ago. But in any case, that was my opportunity to move on. Kathy, luckily, decided, I'll step back from it. The only really good thing that came out of my Galesburg, Illinois experience was I met Kathy. So, and she agreed to go with me to Tucson. It wasn't because of the money, I can assure you that. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I was eating, they had a popcorn machine in the showroom, and I ate popcorn every day for lunch, honest. And I was looking forward to Thursdays, because Thursdays was when Frank would take all the sales managers and all of his management team to lunch every Thursday, so I could have a real lunch. But that's okay. That was part of the deal. I had 3 kids. I had my ex-wife, and I had a lot of obligations to pay. I refused to file personal bankruptcy, and it was not an option for me. My attorneys said, "Oh, you got to file. You can file. You can get rid of all this debt." And I said, "No, that's really not an option. It's not. These creditors put faith in me when I started this business, and I had good credit, but I didn't have that kind of credit. But they put faith in me for parts and all of the different suppliers that we did business with, and I felt a strong obligation to pay them back. Well, it took me 10 years, but I did pay everybody back. And I did not file personal bankruptcy, and I was happy for that. But going forward, in addition to that, my parents had signed a personal guarantee on my loan with the bank. So I obviously wanted to make sure they were protected. And unfortunately, and by the way, this is not about bankers, and I'm not mad at any bankers. One of my best friends is Randy here, is a banker. but unfortunately, this bank that I was doing business with in Galesburg, Illinois at that time they were very unscrupulous, and they got real greedy. And they were looking at my parents' guarantee, they were looking at my assets, and the day that I agreed to close the doors, we all agreed there was enough assets to cover any monies after they liquidated the cars. We'd be fine, and we had parts and stuff to liquidate, and there shouldn't have been any deficit whatsoever. Well, come to find out a little later on, there was a deficit of about $75,000, which is a lot of money back in 1981. Come to find out, they decided to illegally, unlawfully dispose of my assets. They were selling used cars and new cars. I didn't tell you this the other day. They were selling my inventory to friends and family for 50 cents on the dollar. Okay? And a couple of the other fellow dealers in town that were on that bank board decided to help themselves, and they bought some of my late model used cars and a couple classic cars that I had for less than 50 cents on the dollar. So we had to go to court, and of course we proved that. And to make a long story short, I had a lot of legal fees, but we got through it all, and it took a few years, but we were able to get it all cleared up. But I was, again, and then the last thing they did was they unfortunately, the reason I'm telling you this is because you just need to know that you need stuff in writing. Okay, it's one of the lessons here. We had an agreement that I deposited X number of dollars when we closed the doors to pay income tax or withholding tax. Well, they took that money to offset one of my loans. So the IRS didn't get the money. And if you've ever done business with the IRS, if you're late, there's penalties, right? And there's interest fees. Well, they escalated, and they escalated, and they escalated. So it took me a little while, but I got everybody paid off, and everything was fine. So it was a tough experience, but I learned a lot. And that's what helped me get through this last recession 12 years ago.
I think you're starting to see the type of man that Tim is, and the dedication, the willingness to set goals, to achieve those goals, but then to really deal with some great adversity. And you were still relatively young at this point.
Yeah, I was 33 or 34 years old, I guess, yeah.
Think about how many 33, 34-year-olds you know that could deal with this level of challenge, but also be able to bounce back. Now, certainly Kathy must have had a big impact on that. Kathy, raise your hand, everybody, if you will, to do that. I told Tim, you know it's love when you're divorced, financial hardship, and you have to move to Arizona to take a new job. And you still have a partner that's willing to come with you on that journey. So there's no doubt she has an influence on you. So that's how you got to Arizona, but you didn't stay there. Eventually, we were fortunate to bring you here to Cheyenne.
Yes.
How did you get here?
Well, because I hadn't filed bankruptcy, I still had a lot of tax carry forwards. I didn't have to pay income tax like Donald Trump. You know, I didn't have to pay. I legally didn't have to pay any income tax because I had a lot of write-offs for a couple of years, right? And that's the system. So that's okay. So I had, my net checks were pretty good. And I was making pretty decent money, but not enough to take care of all those obligations, including the IRS and all the rest. So I started looking around some more. I pretty much had peaked out what I could earn down there. And I answered some ads again. I was interviewing. And lo and behold, I answered an ad. Bill Terrell Chevrolet at that time, was running an ad looking for a general sales manager. So we had a couple phone interviews. Bill flew me up here, and we met, and he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. He offered me a very large sign-up bonus. After Ace Terrell, if you knew Ace, that was his father. Ace was still living at that time. And actually, Ace had a winter home in Tucson. So Kathy and I went and had a wonderful lunch or dinner. I think it was a lunch with Ace and his wife, Ellen. We became very good friends. And when we got done, and I know this because he told me later, Ace picked up the phone, called Bill, said, "You're going to hire this guy." And Bill was saying, "Well, I'm not." He says, "No, you don't understand." He says, "You're hiring him." He said, "Okay, yeah." So I came to Cheyenne. That was in 1983, in February of 1983. After I'd been here about a week working with Bill, I knew why he gave me such a big sign-up bonus. It was. I'm not
Care
gonna say-
to elaborate?
No, but there was a lot of issues. But that's, you know what? He was a very smart man. He was a good businessman, and we worked. We really did. We had some contentious times together, and our philosophies weren't exactly the same on how we took care of our customers and our employees. But you know, we really did well together. And I worked for Bill for 4.5 years. About the following year, he promoted me to general manager. And he basically had the full run of the whole place, and other than when he'd come back in and throw a few hand grenades, you know. But we really did good things. And frankly, and I'm very proud, and I've told Jim I've got all the files and the records for every month I was there, and every month I've been in the car business. That's why it's taken me so long to move out, Jim. I'm sorry. But we set all kinds of records, and we were one of the top Chevrolet dealerships actually in the Front Range, and we were outselling a lot of the Denver dealers at that time. Again, put together a great team. We had a great organization. Helped Bill build that new Honda dealership. We got that separated. We went through a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, he had promised me a buy-sell. He knew I wanted to get back into the business as a dealer, and he was in his own heart of hearts. He really wanted to do that, but about 3 years into the deal, he started getting second thoughts about it. So after about 4.5 years, we finally had a conversation, and I agreed, or he agreed, that he just wasn't able to pull the trigger at that time. He wasn't ready to sell, and I respected that. So with that being said, I decided to leave the business and looked around and up and down the Front Range, had a lot of opportunities. Jim can remember when I was running, because Jim was running, he was the finance manager at Fassett Nickel Ford at that time, and Nick Nickel would send Ford reps into the Terrell Chevrolet showroom to talk to me, to try to tempt me with a Ford dealership somewhere out of town. But in any case, I had a lot of opportunities. I could have went to a lot of different places, and on my way out of town, Carl Halladay called. And Carl called me and says, we need to talk. I want to visit with you. We had lunch, we had dinner. And he said, you know, he says, I don't have a passion for this business like you do. He said, I'm a second generation dealer like Bill is. Bill had a passion for the car business, by the way. But Carl didn't. Carl's life was his music. And he loved his music, and that's what he wanted to do. That's what he wanted to pursue. He said, if you come to work for me and do for me what you did for Bill, I will sell you my business. And that's what happened. So I went to work for Carl on July 7th of '87. And by the way, Kathy was a few months pregnant at that time with our youngest son, Andrew. And so it really made sense. We fell in love with Cheyenne. We got very involved with the church and other community events. And we really didn't want to leave Cheyenne. So it worked out really well. So I went to work for Carl. At that time, we had Oldsmobile, Cadillac, and Datsun. And that's before Datsun became Nissan, right? So that would have been in July of '87.
So you worked for a while with Carl, and eventually you ended up buying the GM dealership in 1993.
Actually, it wasn't just the GM dealership. I mean, actually, I bought the business, which included the General Motors and the Datsun franchises. And actually, at that time, we had Suzuki as well. Yeah, we had taken it. So yes, I bought the business from Carl in '93. We kept the real estate separate, and I ended up buying that in, assuming that was 1983. No, 93, yeah. And I bought the real estate in '96.
So it's hard for some of us to think of 93 as being 27 years ago when you go back.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time to be involved with Halladay. And over that time, I know you saw some wonderful ups and some pretty fantastic years, and also some major challenges. Tell the audience, what are some of the best times that you saw over that, and some of the biggest challenges that you had to go through?
I think some of the best rewards I've ever had going over the last 50 years in the business was people. Watching people like Jim and a lot of our other employees that, you know, start out working in one position, moving on into another position. It's just so rewarding to watch how that evolved, and the opportunities that they had to make more money and take care of their families. And some of the biggest disappointments I had was people as well. People that you really thought that they were going to turn out to be great, and they didn't turn out to be so great. Or they stole from you, or worse. And but that's just part of business. That's part of life. I really feel blessed, though, that I had that opportunity. And by the way, when I walked in the front door, Carl wasn't like Bill Terrell. Bill Terrell was very hands-on and wanted to know everything that was going on. But Carl Halladay, I walked in the front door, and after 2 days, Carl walked out the back with a big smile on his face. Because he knew that I was there, and we trusted each other. He knew I was going to take care of business, and he gave me his full support. But he says, "Here, you got it. You run with it." And he said, "If you need anything, let me know." He was playing with the Chugwater Philharmonic at that time. He says, we're getting ready to do a little road trip, and I'm going to be out of town for a while. And that's how it went.
So one of the things that's always impressed me about your story is really your commitment to the people and the people that are around you, whether it's your family, your church, but certainly your employees. And while we're going through challenging times right now, many of us remember the Great Recession that we went through. And that had a significant impact on Halladay and on your business, as it did in many businesses. Talk a little bit about how you approach those challenges, because I think some of the things that you and Jim did really attribute to the culture and the success of Halladay.
Well, I have to say at this time that, and I'm glad you brought that up, but Jim Casey really helped me build the culture that we developed in our dealerships. And that's so important. But actually in 2000, General Motors decided to kill the Oldsmobile brand. Now, for you, some of you young people, younger than I, younger than Randy, everybody's younger than Randy. But don't remember, but Oldsmobile was one of the oldest brands in the country. It was one of the first automobiles, right? It had been around for a long time. And they decided, the bean counters at General Motors decided they were going to get rid of Oldsmobile so they could put more resources in Saturn. Okay? Well, Saturn never made a dime, never made a penny for General Motors. But that was a bad decision, obviously. But we lost Oldsmobile in 2000. Now, we were one of the biggest Oldsmobile, largest volume, I shouldn't say big, largest volume Oldsmobile dealers in the Western United States. We were outselling the Denver dealers. We were outselling California dealers. Oldsmobile was a huge brand for us. It was a big mainstay. We sold more Oldsmobiles than we sold anything else at that time. And when they announced that Oldsmobile was going to go away, I thought, oh my God, I just bought this place 6-7 years ago, and now we're going to lose our bread and butter. But God works in my dear friend, and I want to acknowledge Barbara Andrikopoulos for being here today. Barbara, thank you for being here. Her and Andy played a very significant role in our lives, with our family. But my dear friend Andy used to say, Timothy, he said, God works in mysterious ways, but he always provides. He always provides. And here was a case that within a couple of years, the Pontiac Buick franchises became available. And John Deneen called my son Chris, who Chris was working with us at that time, and he announced that they were thinking about selling Pontiac Buick. We were able to work things out, and we were able to purchase the Pontiac Buick franchises from the Deneen family. Along that same line, when we did that, General Motors had us sign an agreement that we would make that dealership an exclusive General Motors dealership, which we didn't fight. We agreed, because at that time we had just lost Oldsmobile. We still had, we had Cadillac and Buick and Pontiac and GMC, Nissan, Suzuki, all under one roof. Well, it didn't make a lot of sense, especially in the service department and parts departments. So we agreed, and we went ahead, and I was able to purchase the old, a lot of you probably don't remember, but where our Nissan dealership is right now, that was a health club. And it was an abandoned health club for like 10 years. It had a swimming pool in it and everything. In any case, I sent a friend of mine in as a shill, and all the bankers got cold chills now when I said shill, but my dear friend, the late Will Clow, a dear friend, went in and was able to negotiate a deal, and we were able to buy the property at a really low price, because if they knew it was for me, the price would have went up. But he went in and says, I'm just looking to make an investment, and I'd like to buy this property, and he was able to negotiate a really low price, and then the next day he signed over the title to me. So that's how we got that property. We scraped the building, and we were able to build a brand new design-built Nissan store. the same time, of course, we had to find a home for Suzuki. And we had a bargain corner, used car lot down in the corner across from Terrell's. And we'd already broke ground. Stefan had already, the plans were all done. We had the architecture was done. The building was under construction. And we had one showroom for Suzuki, one for Subaru. And we got about halfway through the build stage, and the Subaru dealership became available, Subaru Franchise. So once again, Chris and John got together. One thing and another, we were able to purchase the Subaru Franchise. And all this stuff is happening at the same time, right? So we stopped the music, did a little change on the design, and instead of having just a Subaru dealership, we built a double showroom, and we made it for Suzuki and Subaru, and that's how we ended up with that facility as well. But we didn't have any place to put our body shop because we were really growing, and with the truck business, it was exploding, and we had the medium-duty trucks, and we needed a place to work on those, and the RVs, and all that stuff. So Carl Halladay offered me the old Halladay building downtown that he still owned. So we bought that building. And that's where we expanded our paint and collision center. So that's how that on Maxwell. So we did a lot of stuff there in just a few years. Of course, that's all before the Great Recession. We had a couple bad things that happened during that time. During this construction phase, my son Chris came to me, and by that time he started out as a salesperson, sales manager, became general sales manager, and then at that time he was our general manager. And he said, Dad, he said, you know, we're going to have a lot on our hands here to juggle the remodel of the old body shop, building a Suzuki dealership, building the new Nissan dealership. We're doing all this stuff. He said, I think we ought to bring in a general manager, somebody else to run the day-to-day business so you and I can focus on doing this other stuff. And by the way, we had a used car lot over in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, too, at that time. So I said, okay, you're right. And his idea was correct. Problem is we hired the wrong guy. Okay, hired the wrong guy. So in about 2 or 3 years that this guy was with us, this general manager, he basically unwound this beautiful culture that we had developed in our business, in our dealership. And it was becoming very evident. And our customer satisfaction levels were going down. We're having a lot of different issues. And little did I know, but he was in cahoots with our CFO and our office manager. And to make a long story short, we had to let him go, which that wasn't hard for me, knowing that I had to jump back in. But worse than that is we discovered that we had $500,000 missing, and our CFO had embezzled $500,000. This was before the recession. Okay. At the same time, my son Chris came to me and said, Dad, he said, I need to get some help. He said, I've got some addictions I need to deal with. And I said, okay. Well, I knew he had a drinking problem, but what I didn't know is he was also addicted to drugs and gambling. So Chris was addicted 3 ways. But he came to me and said, Dad, I need help, and I'm going to get help. And I encouraged him to do so. So we agreed he'd take a sabbatical. He flew around the country, interviewed, checked out some different places, and he ended up with the CEDAR program in Denver. And for any of you who have any friends or family that have addictions that need some help, CEDAR is one of the best programs in the country, if not the world. So Chris went down. He wouldn't let me help him financially. He paid, I think at that time, it was $25,000 for a month. And he paid his way. He called me when it was all done. He said, Daddy, so I'm gonna go back for another 30 days. Wow, okay. Did that. Then he came in, he said, I'm gonna take some more time off. I said, fine, take as much time as you need. And he was going down there 3 days a week, driving one of our cars, demo, that's fine. He drove down there 3 days a week and as a volunteer. And he worked at the CEDAR program, working as a volunteer to try to help these other folks that needed some assistance. So after a few months of that, he came in one day, he says, Dad, he said, I don't want to be in the car business anymore. I'm going to leave the car business. So I'm thinking, what in the hell are you talking about? Sorry, Father. I said, you're my ticket to ride. I'm getting ready to retire here. You're going to be my successor, and now you're going to be leaving the business. You can't do that. And I'm thinking this to myself. So, all right, I said, I'll tell you what, let's just both think about this. You take some time, some more time, and I got to digest all this, and then let's get together next week. And he did. He came back in. I said, well, Christopher, what do you want to do? He says, Dad, I want to go back to school. I want to get an education. I want to help people with addictions. I want to be a counselor. I want to do something like that to help these folks. Well, how do you argue with that? I said, what can I do to help you? So we planned a deal where I would buy his stock back over a period of time because it was a lot of money and there's no way we could just write a check for it. And so we set up a deal where Mike McGee, thank God, helped us put together a deal, and we bought his stock back over a period of time. And he lived on that money when he went back to school. He went to LCCC, by the way, and got his associate's degree. He went over to UW, got his degree, went back and got his master's degree. And then he worked at Camilla Shelter for a few years. A lot of you folks know that. And then a couple of years ago, he was recruited by some folks in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and now he is running a homeless shelter in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And he's doing a great job. So I'm back in the car business now, right? Big time. Well, the good news is Mr. Casey called me, and we'd stayed in touch, and he worked as my finance manager for like 10 plus years. He went off to other places, ended up in Sheridan, did a real good job up there for a big dealer group, but he wanted to get back to his roots. He wanted to get back to Cheyenne, be closer to family. These aren't coincidences, by the way. You know, God has his hands in all these different things that happen in our lives, and I look back. But in any case, so Jim came up one day, and it's about the time Chris was exiting, and we visited. We had lunch at the Albany. I'll never forget that day. And I told him all the awful, terrible things we've been through, trying to scare him. He didn't scare very easy. And he didn't get up and leave. And he says, you know what? He said, we can make this work. I really want to come back. I want to work with you. And together, we're going to work our way through all this stuff. And we did. So Jim came in as our general sales manager. I sent him to the National Auto Dealers Academy back in Washington, D.C. I think it was about an 18-month deal, maybe 2 years. Did a great job, top of his class, learned a lot of good stuff. I wish I would have saved millions of dollars if I would have went through that class. But I didn't do that. But in any case, he came back, and then within a year, he was promoted or two, he was promoted to general manager. So the Great Recession was very difficult. We went in the recession on our knees. We just experienced a $500,000 embezzlement. And by the way, the district attorney did not press charges. I don't know why. We asked. We had him, he signed documents saying he took the money. The charges were never filed. So we're out of $500,000. We had all these other issues. Jim came in, he and I worked back. We worked together and bringing more good people back into our business and rebuilding the culture that we had so desperately wanted to get back to doing, and he helped me do that. So we were able to do that. But the recession was a little different than today's COVID, and we talked about this in our chamber meetings. That Great Recession was driven by a lot of different things, but the bottom line is the banking industry was a real problem, and the federal government forced the banks to take a real hard look at real estate and the values of real estate. And if you're in business, and if you have a big business like we did, all of your loans are cross-collateralized, right? Your real estate cross-collateralized with in our case, our floor plan loans, and everything's cross-collateralized. Well, we woke up one morning and our real estate values had to been reduced 25%. Just by saying, no appraisals, they just said, this is what your real estate's worth. So all of a sudden, all of our equity went out the window. We had no equity, none. And by the way, this is not a local bank we're dealing with. This was a big national bank. I'm not going to mention their name, but it wasn't very pleasant. It was a real tough situation. So, but we made it through, and we had a couple of advisors come in. That's when Jim Kaufman came in and worked with us really closely, and we were able to work closely with him, and he helped us structure a strategic plan, and we proved to the bank that we're fine, we're solvent, we're selling cars, we're making money, and it took us a couple of years. We worked our way out of that, ended up switching lenders, and everything was just fine. But that was, the Galesburg experience, however, the Town and Country Jobs experience, helped me to navigate through all that. So there's something, even, I guess the moral here is that something good comes out of everything. And even when you're in your worst moments, in your worst hours of all these things, you say, why is this happening to me? What's going on? There's always a reason. And some good reasons came out of it. And by the way, during that period, the local banks were wonderful. And they stepped up and they helped us with a couple different things to help to make sure that we got through that crisis. And that worked out well. So we survived the recession, and we went from the survivor mode to the thriving mode, thanks to Jim and his people. And by the way, we've got some of the best employees anybody could ever ask for. And so that led, that we got through that. And then what's your next question?
Well,
we're trying to cram 50 years worth of stuff in 40 minutes. We're getting close.
I know you are. You're doing well, Tim. And you keep hearing the name Jim. Most of you know Jim Casey. Jim, stand up and just wave if you would, everybody. If you don't know Jim, I will share this that for the past 5 years, right? I think that you and Jim have been implementing one of the most well thought out succession plans that I've seen in business. And I wonder if you just comment real briefly how well that is going and sort of what stage you're at with that succession, that transition to Jim's leadership.
Well, going back, first of all, my retirement plans were kind of put on hold for about 10 years, but that's okay. And I survived it fine. And actually, I enjoyed being involved in the business, and it was a good time for me. But I recognized the fact, too, that I needed to have a successorship plan. And with the manufacturers, if I didn't have a successor plan and my plane went down, General Motors or Nissan, they could appoint anybody they wanted to. God forbid they'd appoint Bob Womack. Bob, are you still here? You just left. That's okay. Bob and I have a very good relationship, but I'd cut his heart out for a car deal, and he knows it, and he'd do the same thing. But they base your performance, your report cards based on sales, market share, sales, customer satisfaction, working capital, and facilities. And you have to be an experienced person in the business to be able to succeed somewhere in the business or be appointed. So, you could have $10 million cash in your pocket and want to go buy a dealership, but if you don't have any experience, they're not going to approve you. You have to have the experience. So it was very easy to get Jim approved. It was nothing. They just rubber stamped the deal, and they said, look, based on the job he'd been doing for us, that was an easy hurdle to overcome. So Jim and I talked about a successor plan. We wanted to make it a smooth transition. We had a lot of opportunities, a lot. And we've always had a very open relationship. And there wasn't a week that hadn't gone by during the recession, after the recession, where I got phone calls from brokers and from big dealer groups that wanted to buy our dealership group for cash, including the real estate. So it was very attractive in some cases, right? Do I really want to do this? But down deep, I knew that's not what I wanted to do, because I knew what happened. I watched what happened to some of these dealerships. And and I'm not saying anything bad about that, these people were bad operators, but I knew they were going to change the culture that we had developed for Halladay Motors. And it wasn't going to be good for our employees, and it wasn't going to be good for our customers. So we said, no, we're not going to do that. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And it just made me want to work harder to try to get something going with Jim that we could work it out. So we ended up working on a 5-year transition. And over that 5 years, he was able to purchase enough stock and then at the end of the 5 years, which ended in March, by the way, early March. Thank God it wasn't the middle of March, it was early March, that we made the final payment, and we were able to consummate the deal. And he became the 4th president of Halladay Motors: Carl Sr., Carl Jr., myself, and now Jim. So I couldn't have picked a better guy. It was a great transition. It's been very seamless for our employees, very seamless for our customers. Nothing really changed, except that I moved my office down to the Nissan store, and we did that during the remodel of the GM store, knowing that I didn't want to be the focus there. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Jim was in charge. So that worked out really well as well.
That's
Great. Well, congratulations. Real quickly, two more questions. I know we're running out of time. At everybody's table, there are copies of two documents. One of the things that we talked about is really your focus on family and what you've done as a family and thinking about the family business aspect. Tell the audience just a little bit about the two documents that we have, the stewardship document and the philosophy, the family philosophy.
Well, the stewardship document, first of all, we had formed our family foundation, I don't know how many years ago, 15, 20 years ago, knowing that we wanted to have an instrument that we could make our contributions to and build that foundation up so it would perpetuate me and the kids would continue our four children would be able to perpetuate what we've been doing. And I think it pretty well speaks for itself. I'm not going to, got my glasses. But the bottom line is stewardship is the ecstasy of giving the best we have to the one we love the most. And of course, that's God. And because everything comes from God. And that which we give is greatly multiplied and comes back to us in unexpected ways. And I can attest to that. I can attest to that. Even in the darkest of times, when we weren't sure about how we were going to make payroll the next week. And by the way, Jim and I are the only ones that took a cut in pay during the recession. We didn't cut anybody's pay. We didn't lay anybody off either. But we still made contributions. We never stopped making the contributions into the community because we knew that these agencies needed it worse than we did. And that was really difficult, just kind of what they're going through right now. So that's how we came up with the stewardship plan. And we have our family foundation. And I'm able to continue with that. I have more time to do that. I rented an office downtown on Cary, and that's where I'll be running our family foundation, our family properties. The other document is our family philosophy. And I came across this a number of years ago, and actually it was written by Mother Teresa. Dusty, you know Mother Teresa, don't you? You know her, yeah. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you're kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're successful, you win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Well, I can attest to that. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have. It may never be enough. Give the world the best you have anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it's between you and God. It never was between you and them anyway. That kind of summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about today.
Powerful, powerful. So, Tim, I know this conversation could go on for many more hours, and there's just so much to tell. And if I would encourage you to take him to lunch, buy him coffee, have the conversation. You'll learn more about yourself and about this community just by learning about Tim. But you told me when we were preparing for this that you look at your life in three parts: your personal life, your business life, and your spiritual life. Yep. So maybe as a way to wrap up, tell the audience what your most cherished or significant moments are in each of those areas.
Well, first of all, my personal life, without a question, when Kathy agreed to marry me in 1985. And by the way, we were married here in Cheyenne. Anthony Androkopoulos was our best man. He later became our godfather for our son, Andrew. But that is the highlight of my personal life. So Kathy, thank you for saying yes. And again, she didn't marry me for my money. That was way before all that. In my spiritual life, two things come to mind. When I became an archon in our Orthodox Christian Church, in our faith, which is the highest level a layman can reach in our faith, and we have a few other archons here in this community. Andy got me involved with that as well. Sam became an archon here a couple of years ago. That was a highlight. And then as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, when we broke ground for our Holy Apostles Orthodox Christian Church, we actually started a second Orthodox Christian church here in Cheyenne. It's been, 6 or 7 years now. And I feel blessed that I was able to be part of that and to watch both churches grow and grow our faith. So those are the highlights of my spiritual life. In business, the biggest, I guess, most recently, when I became a dealer again, became the owner of Halladay Motors. And by the way, I was reading something the other day that said that it's not how fast and how high you get in life as far as your accomplishments in your business or your career, but it's how fast and how high you bounce back when you hit the wall. And I feel good about that. So I guess that was my second feel like I accomplished something in business, and having the opportunity to work with all these different mentors and different people along the way. And then the last thing, of course, is to have the opportunity to watch Jim take the business, and not take it, but take it to the next level, and to grow it, and to continue to grow it. And the proof of it was here in the middle of March, 2 weeks after he became the president of Halladay Motors. And guess what happened? The virus, right? The COVID, all this nasty stuff. But he didn't lay anybody off. He didn't cut anybody's pay. And it's been business as usual, other than the safety things, of course, that he implemented in the dealership, so our employees and our customers are safe, working in a safe environment, which we should have been doing anyway. But he hasn't missed a lick, and he's continuing to grow the business. Those are my three.
Exceptional. So Tim, you have a captive audience for a few more minutes. Any last remarks, words, thoughts, advice, guidance as you think about how these individuals navigate our community, their careers, their business?
I do. By the way, I mentioned I've had a lot of mentors over the years, both personally, spiritually, and in business. If I mentioned the names in business, you wouldn't recognize them because they were all, mostly these are old car guys. But my father and mother were good in both areas. They both were tremendous mentors for me in business, in family, and spiritual. Spiritually, I had the blessing of working with Father Dean Tallaghan of blessed memory. Worked with Kathy and I when we first moved to Cheyenne. He was very instrumental in helping us improve our spiritual life in this journey. My biggest spiritual mentor, however, is Jesus Christ. And if you take a look at the life of Jesus, that's who we need to be. And that's who I have decided I'm going to try to be more. We should all be more Christ-like in everything we say and think and do. So that's, as far as the mentors go. One of my mentors, I mentioned earlier, is Anthony Anticopoulos. And I look back on my career and I said, how did I make it through that? How did I get through this and do that? But Andy had a great saying: faith and perseverance on a wing and a prayer. That's a good one. And that pretty much summarizes my journey for the last 50 years in the car business. Faith and perseverance on a wing and a prayer. 3 words of wisdom, and I gave this to a couple of you in this room when you started your own businesses. Before you venture into business, make sure you have a good attorney and talk to more than one. Make sure that your thoughts and their thoughts are the same, right? It doesn't make them a bad person if you don't agree, but make sure that you're on the same wavelength and they have the same values that you do. A good attorney, a good CPA, again, with the same values that you do, and a good priest or rabbi or minister, whatever your faith may be. Some spiritual guidance. And Nick, are you still in the room? He may have had to leave. There you are. There's one more I got to add to that list. And you don't have to worry about this because you've got it. But make sure you have an understanding and devoted partner in life. Because when you go through the ups and downs that the business can bring you through, and you've all seen it, whether it affected yourself or somebody else, it can be really stressful on a marriage or a relationship. So that fourth one is very important. The last thing I'm going to leave you with, a good friend of mine, Nick, Harry Nick is his name, I met through some church functions. Sam, you've had the opportunity to meet Harry. They live in the East Coast. They've been tremendous supporters of our new church here in Cheyenne, financially and otherwise. But we met smoking cigars one night on I like an occasional cigar, occasional. And we were at this big function, the Leadership 100, and we're on this balcony in California. And there's stuff's going on inside there. And I'm out there to go out to have a little cigar, and he's over there having a cigar. We met, we hit it off, became fast friends. But he's told me this a couple of times, and I call him Uncle Harry. He's not really not my uncle, but Uncle Harry's philosophy on life. Number one, take good care of yourself. Think about that. Take good care of yourself. Now, it's up to you to define how you're going to do that. And what is your definition of taking care of yourself? I'm not going to tell you. You have to figure that out for yourself. But if you look around the room, not around the room, but if you look around your life, you look around the community, people you know, family and friends that didn't take good care of themselves, and what the consequences are. So number one, take good care of yourself. And that means both physically and spiritually, by the way. Sometimes you got to go to the spiritual gym too. Right, Father? Number two, do something good. Do something good. Again, that's up to you to decide. How do you define do something good? Does that mean that you become a foster parent? Does it mean that you adopt a child? Does that mean that you support the Boys and Girls Club? Does it mean that you support United Way or get involved with some community things? It's your definition, but do something good outside of just about you. There's more to this life and the world about just you. Put your focus on something else. Do something good. And last but not least, have the ability to stay in the game. I really like that one. And again, I've been blessed in so many ways that yes, we have a new president of the company. I'm chairman of the board. That means I collect my rent once a month. I have to ask for a report now and then, but I don't really need them. But have the ability to stay in the game. Well, I've got my family properties and I have our family foundation. And believe me, I got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of different fundraising things I've been involved in, and I enjoy all of it. But all of you, again, can determine. That's up to you to determine. How do you want to stay in the game? And I look back over the years, some people I know that retired or were forced to retire or left doing whatever they did for a living, and within 6 months they were gone. Their life they just couldn't deal with life. So have other interests, but you determine that. So take good care of yourself, do something good, and have the ability to stay in the game.
A wonderful story. An amazing man. Ladies and gentlemen, let's congratulate our newest inductee into the Chamber of Commerce's Circle of Champions, Jim Joannides.
Thank you, Joe. There's always one more thing, right, Randy? Never give up. Never give up. I've got a cartoon I'll show you later. But never give up. Because if you give up, you can't continue to give back. Thank you.